Okay, so the first question I have is, what was your favorite book or author as a child?
Oh my. I think it was my father's poetry.
Yeah.
hmm He made us a black book, each of us, but there were three of us, my cousin and my brother and me, and he made each of us a leather book, black, with our names in gold on the front. And as he wrote the poems, he would put the page in each of our books. And so mine is now stuffed and it can hardly take any more. And it's a loose leaf affair. It's got a metal piece that slides onto the back. And they kept accumulating these pages in my little black book, and I still have it.
You do?
And he wrote us maybe 100 poems total, maybe more, because he directed them right to us, to each one of us, because he knew us so well. And besides, he insisted that we give him the ideas for the poems.
Mm-hmm.
We got tired of hearing about other people's children. We wanted poems about us, of course.
Do you have a favorite poem within that collection that he wrote for you guys?
I don't think so. Susan Russo, though, almost at the time of his death, published a book called The Ice Cream Ocean, which was one of his poems, and it's an anthology, and it has a lot of famous poets.
Oh, wow.
The Ice Cream Ocean is one of the poems in it, and she decorates it beautifully, so you art majors should take a look at it especially. Susan Russo's book.
Okay.
He never saw the finished item. He saw it before it was published, but he died before it was actually published, which is kind of too bad. But
yeah. Is there a certain book that you asked your dad to read to you all the time?
he read a lot of Robert Louis Stevenson, and Alice in Wonderland was one of our favorites, of course, and the Christopher Robin poems. I think those were our favorites.
And then how did the children's stories affect you as a child? Like, did they influence you in any way?
They influence me more now than they ever did as a
Really?
child. Yeah. It was a thrill, though, to give him an idea, and he would go to the typewriter and type. But we never knew what he was typing for his job, which is what he did most of the time, or if he was typing a poem for us. And we were very young then. I think he did most of the poems between my age of 3 and 10, something like that. Maybe later than that even.
And I know that you're a painter, and I was wondering if any of the stories or poems affected or inspired your paintings.
No.
No. What do you like to paint?
I paint flowers,
Oh,
mostly. Kind of like Georgia O'Keeffe.
yeah.
My housemate says they're better than Georgia.
So, what are some of your fondest memories of your father?
I remember him pulling us up on his lap, one under each arm, with the book in his lap. My cousin beside us, she was older, so she outgrew the poems before we did. And he would come home in the evening, and there's a poem called Headlights Shine, which is how we felt greeting him in the evening. We'd wait for his headlights to drive up to the house, and there he was, and he was going to take us on his lap and read us poems. And that's what he did. And he was a singer. He sang all the time. He had I think it's a baritone voice, but a high baritone. And he would sing the songs of the gay 90s and Glasgow drinking songs, because he was born in Glasgow. And the Scots are great singers anyway. But he especially would drop, at the drop of a hat, he would start singing. Anything would set him off. And he liked Gilbert and Sullivan. And I remember him doing that. And then we had games that we played. I would stand in front of him and with my back toward him and bend over and put my hands between my legs, and he would grab hold of my hands and flip me over. Remember that particularly. And then dancing on his feet. I think all kids do that.
Yeah.
And then we had bare feet stockings. That was, he wrote a poem about barefoot stockings. Well, it was something we shouldn't do, walk around the house in our bare feet stockings. And some of the poems are about things we shouldn't do, and some of them are about things we love to do. So there were all kinds.
I was wondering, did you have sort of an ultimate fairy tale novel growing up, or did your father write any sort of fairy tale novels?
He wrote a fairy tale for my cousin. I think it was probably one of the last poems he ever wrote for us children. It's a real long one. The Gnome of Darkling Dell is the name of it.
Wow.
It's real long.
Yeah.
At the time that he wrote that for her, he of course had to write one for me. And the frog, it's about a frog anyway. So there's quite a difference between my cousin and me in who we are.
Do you remember your father getting really excited about certain books that he added to his collection when he got them, or?
No, I don't remember any particular one. I would love to read about, in his autobiography, about his purchase of his first book when he was a child still. Mm-hmm. And he was walking to school with his little sister, and they passed a secondhand bookstore, and Oliver Twist was in the window. And how he waited and waited until he had enough coins to pay for that book. Mm-hmm. And that book is in the collection still. Yeah. So Dickens was a favorite of his, although Dickens was not a poet. He was a novel writer who was very concerned about conditions of living with lower class people's problems particularly. And Oliver Twist, of course, was an orphan.
Right.
Things were not good.
Do you know what his favorite book in the collection was, or was it probably the first book he bought, Oliver Twist, or would you say it was a different one?
I don't know what the favorite book would be, because his interests just went everywhere. Yeah. He had no limit to what he was interested in. And he would follow up his interest by buying books about whatever. But they usually had to do with literature, and poetry in particular. But there are books on bibliography and biography and books about children, about collecting, publishing, writing, all that in the collection. So he really didn't have many limits.
In what ways has your father and his collecting and love of books inspired you?
I don't think I appreciated it all that much. I started out as a double major in college, English and physical education. But where I went to school, we had to spend 2 hours a day learning PE skills. And I didn't have time to do all that reading I had to do for English, so I dropped the English major and ended up with a PE degree. So, but it was his interest in all of the arts. And he and my mother went to the plays in New York City often, and especially musicals. They took us to the Paper Mill Playhouse in Short Hills, New Jersey, where they had lots of musical events. I don't ever remember him taking me to a museum, but he himself was a very good drawer. I mean, he could draw things. When they immigrated to the U.S., he was homesick, and my sister told him, why don't you paint what you remember of Scotland? So my daughter has 2 of his paintings. They're very small, but they represent Scottish scenes. A blacksmith is one of them, and the other one is a lady with a creel, having been fishing. Mm-hmm. She had a creel on her back with her day's catch. Oh, wow. So there are these 2 small paintings. He was 14 when they immigrated. Mm-hmm. He went to school, junior high school. He told his mother, I don't need to go to school, I know this already. Now if you're a mother, you have heard that from your own children. I don't need to go to school. My son, however, avoided school as much as he could. And I told him he ought to quit school when he was 16. My father would not have recommended that, I don't think. But Bob got nothing out of his grade school education, and not too much out of his college either. But he's a very successful guy. He has a really good job in computer technology. Wow. So, and he writes poetry, which I don't understand at all. Wow. So, and as far as my father's influence in poetry affecting me, it never really did much, except I did write poetry all my life. And just recently I've joined the Pen Women, National League of American Pen Women. I'm not sure the exact title of the organization, in Iowa City, where I live close to Iowa City now. And painting has become a little difficult in that I can't focus long enough to do it. It takes a long stretch of time, and I have a hard time coming by that long stretch of time. Whereas a poem will jump into my head and I can just write it down. It's a lot easier than painting. And when you write a poem, it doesn't get finished right away. It's just the idea. And then you let it gel for a week, a month, 2 months, a year, and then it's finally done. But painting, you have to be there, and you have to have the space ready, everything. There's just a lot to it. Yeah. And you have to market it. And that's the worst part. Any of you artists, you know that. Yeah. The marketing is the hard part, the part you don't want to do.
Yeah. Do you have any collections of your own?
What do I collect? I collect everything. Yeah. Art books. I have a pretty good collection of art books. But I certainly haven't done any tabulating of it the way my father did of his collection. He tabulated his collection as it went along. After the period of our childhood when he was reading and reciting poetry to us, he would come home from work with a new book that he bought. Then he would put it in a binder on the back of his desk. And these binders kept increasing year after year after year on the back of his desk. until there were probably about 12 of them when he moved to Florida with the whole collection of 6,000, almost 6,000 books.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a lot of books.
That's a lot of books.
Yeah. Well, he had retired by then, and he lived almost another 30 years after that, and he worked in the collection that whole time. So, and he kept collecting, and the library still collects for the collection. So, it's growing still.
Yeah. What is your favorite type of literature?
Pardon?
What is your favorite type of literature?
Oh, poetry by all means.
Yeah.
I even read novels as if it were poetry. I say the words in my head, so I'm a very slow reader.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And yeah, I think you have to do that when you read poetry.
Yeah.
If you want to get to the end of it like you usually do with a novel, you'll never understand it.
Who is your favorite poet?
My favorite poet is Gerard Manley Hopkins. He was an English monk, and so a lot of his poems are in a religious nature.
When did you start volunteering at the special collections, and how often do you volunteer?
I've been doing it since 1997. That was the first year they let me. I keep asking to, but, and it's a privilege. It really is. Because you don't just let anybody come in and handle your books, and you're a librarian.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel very privileged that I could get that close to it.
Yeah.
And I've been coming down here every winter since, and I stay about 3 or 4 months. And that's what I do when I'm down here. I have a studio, but mostly I get so involved in the collection that I don't do much painting when I'm down here. I'm having a show though in April. So in Monticello at the Jefferson Arts Building, which is about 2 blocks, maybe 3, west of the Opera House, or west of the
And what day is that?
county courthouse.
What day is the showing?
It starts in April sometime.
Okay.
They haven't given me an exact date yet for the opening, but I hope you'll all come.
Oh yeah, that's very exciting.
Maybe a class field trip.
Yeah,
Right? That
yeah.
actually really cool.
Oh, that would be,
Marvel.
that would be
exactly.
wonderful.
Yeah.
I would meet you there if you do, so keep in touch.
Yeah, we will. Thank you so much. That's all the questions I have. If you guys have any, or
I kind of asked my questions.
Yes.
That's really what I was just interested in. Did your father have a favorite poet?
Have a what?
Favorite poet?
Dr. Seuss. And Mulberry Street. He was thrilled with Mulberry Street. And then the next book was Bartholomew Cubbins, which was not poetry. And my father wrote to Dr. Seuss and said, hey, you've got a thing going here with this poetry, do some more. And so ever since then, Dr. Seuss did write poetry instead. And it's wonderful.
yeah.
It's a lot of fun. None of that serious Milton and Blake and all that stuff.
Does your son just write poetry for fun, or
Yes.
does he actually?
I think he does it to impress me, frankly. But I have a hard time understanding what he's doing. And he's not terribly focused on it. He's really a computer technician person. And he has a staff that works for him in the business that they're in, plastics. Like The Graduate. You know The Graduate, the movie?
Yeah.
One of my favorites.
It's a good movie.
Okay, well,
I think that's it.
thank you.
Thank you.
Well,
so
thank you
much.
very much for inviting me. I've enjoyed talking to you all. And also to, yes. I'm trying to think of her name.
Oh, Lauren.
Lauren. Yeah, Lauren and Emily. That was fun too. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.